So good morning, Fabian, to Zurich. Are you
Hi,
in
Ruthie.
Well, it's so good that you found the time to talk to us. Fabian, you co-founded the Office Design to Production, and the very first time we met in Norway at the NTNU University in Trondheim, where our friend Knut Einar Larsen, who was in charge of the timber chair, the chair of timber construction, invited both of us for a workshop on timber construction. And you did an amazing pavilion with the students, where everything was based on the same module. So welcome very much. I'm teaching computer integrated design. You are helping all the people who work with the computer, who design with the computer, to actually build what they design. Tell us all about it.
I'm trying to. Yeah, I mean, since you're touching our roots, basically, I'm still really grateful for this Camera Obscura project in Trondheim, because that was really pivotal for us in many ways. First, I met Miss Ruth, Computer Aided Anything Berktold, and not just enjoying the professional discussions we have, but you're also one of the roots I still have in Munich. So you're an anchor for me, and I'm looking forward to have some post-Corona beer garden as quick as possible.
I promise.
And second, Trondheim happened literally minutes before we turned design to production from a research group at ETH into a commercial company. And after fooling around within the university with laser cutters and such things, Trondheim was the first time we worked with full-scale digital timber joinery machines. And that was sort of also a bit of an eye-opener for us. I mean, the project actually really was done by the students. We were maybe 2 weeks ahead in terms of knowledge, and mainly smart-assing around them. But we also learned quite a bit. And that sort of was a bit the foundation of what came afterwards. That we stumbled into our first large-scale timber project directly after that. That was the Centre Pompidou in Metz, and sort of got everything together to get design to production on the ground as a company. And the idea is that the whole company is built around the idea that someone needs to connect digital design and digital production. Because basically both ends are already there, but there's a missing link in between. And so the name is the program. We're doing neither design nor are we offering production ourselves. We're just doing the two in the middle.
What did you study?
I have a degree in computer science, actually, but I studied architecture as a minor in Munich at the Technical University. When you studied computer science, then long time ago, you had to also do a minor subject. And I picked architecture after trying out electrical engineering for 3 weeks until I realized that that's probably a really bad idea.
I would have lasted half a day. Not even.
So, and I always had an interest in architecture, and I had a girlfriend who was studying architecture at the time that might have added to that. So I sort of took the venture and dug myself into the administration of Technical University and tried to get this special minor subject, architecture, approved, and then sort of started having a foot on both sides of the fence, and that turned out to be a good idea, but only 10 years later.
Well, you never know in the beginning. I remember when I started checking you out, trying to understand what you're really doing, and I saw all these amazing buildings by architects such as Zaha Hadid, Maximiliano Fuchsas, Sanaa. I mean, the huge Rolex Learning Center. I mean, all of that. We're clearly going to show your portfolio or your website. I do a lecture about you guys every term for my students. And even just designing not the scaffolding, but the what you call Bewährung in English.
Reinforcement.
The reinforcement, but also the, in order to cast a concrete slab.
Formwork.
Thank you. Even just designing the formwork for something as crazy as the Sana project. I mean, I'm just so fascinated by it. And I think you have to explain a little bit more what really your work is and who hires you. It's usually not the architects, or sometimes it is. Tell me.
It's starting to change, but typically we're actually hired in 3/4 of the project. We're hired by the contractors executing the things in the end. Mainly because then you cannot avoid the discussion anymore, typically. Because I mean, all these blobs, you call them, yeah, all this crazy, funky Formula One architecture we've been involved in is actually just an accident on so many levels that happens for 15 years now, because basically we're aiming for a digital turn, not just in architecture, but in building. And we see all this crazy production equipment out there. And we see architects who actually want to do things differently, but there is hardly any connection in between there. And we think that prefabrication is a good idea, and digital prefabrication is an even better idea, not only for blob projects, but also for the other 99.999% of architecture. But disrupting
the boxes of this world.
Yeah. The boxes are great, and there's a lot of potential still in building better boxes, I think.
Absolutely.
But disrupting the supertanker building industry from the little rubber boat we're sitting in is difficult, and we need some turbulence. And the crazy projects are actually the turbulence that we are exploiting to get a foot in the door, because when you try to we propose to change production paradigms in some orthogonal housing project, there's always people saying, oh no, we've been doing it like this for decades and it worked, so why change? And for a project like the Swatch headquarters, everybody is standing on their toes from the beginning. And suddenly they realize that they cannot do this with the tools they have at hand, and probably need to think about their processes and their tools. And it's not just a question of having a digital fabrication machine in the end. It's about how do you set up this 6-year process of going from an early design until the erection of the thing in the end. Because there's been 75,000 parts in there that had to be fabricated. And that somehow this puzzle needs to come together on site in the end. And that's basically why we're doing this blobby things mainly, yeah, because that's the only point where people try to do something new. They take the risk of changing their paradigms.
But look at Ben van Berkel's Mercedes Museum. Mm-hmm. You helped out with the structural engineering there. I mean, you've helped so many amazing architects, or let's say the executor of the architecture, to actually make it more efficient, to make it buildable, to make it cheaper in production. And that brings me, or brought you to the point where you started thinking about elements and modules. And always collecting information on you, because I can't call you every single time I'm lecturing about you. I know I always have the permission to use your slides. You did this crazy huge man for, I think, a skiing competition or something like that. And by showing us that huge wooden structure, you talk about modules and elements and the importance of that. Tell us something about the big man. And the meaning behind it, obviously.
The name of the big man is Eddie. Unfortunately, he's dead already. He was sort of basically a big showpiece standing next to the main stage for the skiing world championship in St. Moritz in 2017. Sort of as also as a stage, because there were people climbing on it and dangling from it and doing performances up there and stuff. So it's a 19-meter high wooden skier, basically modeled after one of the famous guys in the 1930s, I think, in St. Moritz, who won the first World Cup or something like that. Edi Reinalter was his name. And that was it's the idea of the sort of event agency that designed the whole World Cup there, and it was a high-speed project for us. Basically, there was a kickoff meeting in October, and the thing had to be opened in February. We were lucky to basically had our part done just before Christmas, and then the timber guys had to work over holidays in the workshop. And that's sort of a prototypical project for us, because it's really small, it's really high speed, and you really have to be very productive and very efficient and very pragmatic about it. So it contains about 300 wooden triangles that are CNC cut from cross-laminated timber, 70mm boards.
Were they all the same? Was it all the same module, or
no,
was it different?
They're all different. That's sort of behind all the projects that we're doing in this crazy corner, is that basically all the parts are different, but they're all following the same rules. So every triangle basically is the same in terms of the data behind it. They just look different. And the main task is to sit together with the engineers and the fabricators and find out, how do you invent a building system that can be produced as quick as possible and can be assembled as quick and as safe as possible.
I always love your computer models. You know, when you show how the system, you know, how it figures out how it's optimized. I don't even know how to describe it, but maybe we can share a little movie about one of these models where you're trying, you know, trying to figure out where the columns are supposed to be, or, you know, I love that. And I mean, you clearly have a history based on KARLSTRASSE, which, you know, doesn't ring a bell for everybody, but I think it's important to know it started in Kaiserslautern, and Professor Ludger Hobelstadt took it to Zurich, I think, and you were, you know, also at chair at that point. And so next question. I mean, clearly, I think timber is one of your favorite materials. That's one thing, but maybe I'm totally wrong. Does it work for every material? What?
But the timber thing is also an accident, actually. So we never really planned to become timber specialists 15 years ago. But it turned out that timber is actually already more digital than most other materials. So there's a lot of digital fabrication equipment out there. Basically every mid-sized carpentry out there in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, at least, and parts of Italy and France, has a digital joinery machine standing in its workshop. And they're using that to do the roof trusses that they've been doing all the time, more quicker and more efficient. And that's already there. It's just used for old school things. And the other good thing with timber is that prefabrication has always been the default mode of thinking in timber. So all the carpenters basically did all the detailing on the floor before they hoisted the beams up into the roof. And they actually did it in the workshop then, before they brought it on site. So the whole idea of, okay, I need to think detailing before I start working. I'm doing the things off site and then I bring it to site. The whole mindset is already there in timber as opposed to other trades. And the other thing is it goes around the bend easily, so we can quickly do those curvy, crazy things better than in other materials.
Which brings me to my next topic. Are we gonna use BIM in the future? Is every office, and I invited you for the summit already, cool, on the future of the building. And I'm doing this with Chris Sharpus, that you also met at University of Applied Sciences in Munich. And one of the big topics clearly will be BIM, Building Information Modeling. Are we all going to use it at one point?
Are you still using your typewriter?
No, not us. But
so
you know,
I think it's not a question. So it's not. I mean, it's. I mean, we can discuss the name if it's called BIM or Virtual Design and Construction or whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, the tools are changing because the technology is changing, and then also the opportunities change, and this is a cycle that is going on. You cannot really avoid it, I think. We've been talking about BIM since the 1990s. Yeah, I remember being in Munich with Richard Junge and had my first BIM experiences there. And we've been talking BIM since then. Now what happens is that basically BIM crashes into digital fabrication a bit, because suddenly we're talking a lot more timber in recent years. For sustainability reasons, but also for prefabrication reasons. Everybody wants to build timber high rises and housing projects and so on. Suddenly regulations and rules are changing that make things possible there. And suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a world where you actually have an industry out there that's digital and can provide prefabricated elements and modules. And you realize that basically the whole BIM thing is aiming at delivering 2D drawings in the end after working with all those fancy digital tools. While on the other side, fabricators are waiting for fabrication data and every time rebuilding their fabrication models from 2D drawings that they get from the planning side. And then those two things are crashing at the moment. So this is going to be the point where I'll be probably fooling around in the near future to reconnect things again, because there's a missing link. And either we sit there on the fabrication side of things and say, I don't care how you produce those 2D drawings, you can basically paint them if you like, but I'm going to work on my 3D model afterwards. Or we try to connect the pre-tender and the post-tender stage in those projects also on a digital level, and that's going to be some task in the near future.
I think all the chambers of architecture are thinking about how to, redivide the fees and the fee structures, because with every BIM project, which clearly we all use BIM programs. It's almost a mystery how we avoid using it as a real BIM tool, right? It's so weird. I try telling everybody we are using BIM. It's just yeah, I think that the engineer and the fabrication has to come in earlier, in the early phases, because if you build a BIM model and you have no idea about construction, then you can rebuild it again, and it's just a waste of time. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Also, what you mentioned, everybody wants to do timber high-risers. Everybody's talking about building with modules. First, we had the refugee crisis, where all of a sudden we were all going to Dornbirn, visiting the fabricators there. We talked to Switzerland, people that were, big in hybrid modules and elements. And I hope that at one point all of these different disciplines will come together, and we will have a better and a more sustainable building process, just in order to save energy and money and the environment, clearly. And in the last few months, I think it has become clearer and clearer that this is going to be one of the main tasks of the future. What other trends do you see? I mean, when we had a little pre-talk, you said, woohoo, digitalization, it's here, yay. We were force-fed in the last few months, so in the last few weeks, basically. What new trends do you see? Because for me, you always know where the future goes.
But I mean, for me, definitely what's interesting me is to see how we can get out of this Formula One corner and onto the road, basically. So we've been doing those crazy things and fooling around and trying new things for quite a while now. And what the challenge really is on to get the spin-off into the other 99% of the building. And there is a chance, I think, where we have this prefabrication issue now coming up with mass timber. I realize that there's very few people out there who actually are really thinking about what that means in terms of what are we doing there? What does it mean if we're talking BIM and everybody's looking at this famous McLeamy curve where you say, oh, you have to shift the effort forward in the process to have a longer lever and have more efficiency in the planning. And then you have sort of this other heap, this BIM heap, where the question is, are we really just shifting the planning work forward in time and doing the same things as we've always been doing? Which means actually we're only in the same deep shit 6 months earlier in the process. Yeah. Or is someone realizing that we need to talk what's underneath this curve and that the content of this whole planning process needs to adapt to end at the right point? Because I mean, what you say, that we're all doing this digital planning in BIM, and then someone's basically on the fabricator side is looking at the model, throwing it into the BIM and reworking it, because there's a lot of shotgun modeling out there, which means no, we're not aiming at an objective, and we're building a model that's precisely built for that reason. We're just modeling something that looks like the plans and the things that we've always done in architecture and engineering, yeah, and they're good for showing things, but they're not good for bringing them to the other side and actually using them for fabrication. And this is, I think, mainly because we don't know where the actual objective is. We don't know what the other side is expecting. And if you knew what the other side was expecting, we'd probably build completely different BIM models.
Well, I would be you, and I couldn't sleep anymore. Trust you me.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of the dialogue is missing to a certain extent, I think. Yeah, and that's sort of the thing that really is challenging me now at the moment, is to find out how to explain to the early planning stages, architects, all the planners in there, how we could set up digital models in a way that we don't have to throw them away all the time after each stage. And it's always like this sawtooth thing. Yeah, there's digital information built up to a certain point, and then you hand it over to the next stage, and basically they throw it all away and start rebuilding it.
But you know, there's a new job description for you. I was doing a workshop in Antwerpen with a lot of architects, and everybody is talking about BIM and how to get in BIM consultants, because BIM is this crazy thing that nobody knows what it really is, and everybody's afraid of it, and everybody wants to get in a consultant and pay a lot of money just to understand the process behind it. So maybe that's something, you know, go into the offices early. This is why we're doing this talk, because I think you're doing such an important job, and I'm so privileged that I know about you and that I met you many years ago, you know. And I think we were very lucky, you know. There was this workshop on BIM and IFC Schnittstelle in Oslo many years ago, and then we met in Trondheim, and already they were doing so many projects with timber, you know. For that was a strange thing to see at that time, you know. You couldn't think about a woody or other buildings like that are existing. So yeah, I think you were you're a real pre-thinker, and you were there really early. And which ones of your projects should we show other than Eddie? Because now everybody wants to know who Eddie is.
Eddie's on the small side of things a bit. So we have something on the large side also, also on the crazy side, which is the new headquarters for Swatch by Shigeru Ban. That was opened last year, and it's one of the very few projects where we were actually involved pre-tender. So early on, already in 2013, after the schematic design, we entered the project on behalf of the client. and worked alongside with the planning team until tender, and then basically were handed over to both the timber and the facade contractor, and also did a few things on the inside and for the installations. Then basically taking those models one step further and down to fabrication data for basically everything that's in this crazy facade. It's a 11,000 square meter timber grid shell with an office facade on top. And that actually also caused some head scratching on our side. I mean, that was really, in the end, it was 75,000 individual prefabricated components that had to come from steel, aluminum, timber, glass, ETFE, you name it, we had it. So there's also a whole supply chain of probably 20 subcontractors in the end that fabricated things that then came together for the facade. And to get this thing organized is actually the big challenge.
Well, we will show that project too, because I think talking about what you're doing and not showing images is difficult. I'm so grateful you talked to me today, and you know, we're sharing this with a lot of people. We had a lot of viewers in the last 6 weeks. So a last message to the students and all the other viewers, architects, engineers who are watching this all over the world, hopefully. What is out there in the future, and what are we thriving for?
I think we're actually thriving for, finally, we're thriving for digitalization in terms of a digital turn in architecture and building. Up to now, it was really just digitizing what's been there. So using new tools to do the same things as before. Now it's actually about rethinking what we're doing, because especially when it comes to prefabrication, there's a few paradigms that need to be challenged in the sort of traditional thinking about architecture and building. I think that architects shouldn't be afraid of the whole thing, because mainly it's an issue of coordination and management. It's not so much about the crazy design creative work there. A lot of it is really down to earth organizational and management tasks, also on the digital side of things, and they're new. But who would be better prepared for actually holding all the strings in a complex project than the architects? They just have to, I think, jump the bandwagon and care about what this whole thing is about. It's about building digital models that are useful not only in their little garden, but also on the other side of the fence, because that is the real added value and efficiency that come out. And I'm really looking forward to see more timber buildings, and we're trying to get this thing out there. So we are offering also to help architects thinking about timber projects, because they pose a few new questions that haven't been there. And we realized that in our first large-scale rectangular timber building that we basically finished a year ago, and I have to say it was not fun to work in there because we were coming in very late with the fabricator, and it was clearly visible that it was not a good digital process, and it was not a timber project from the beginning. And there were so many things that were not sorted out. And I think that's the point where we need to start now, is to say, hey, what are the objectives? What are the aims? Where do you want to end up? And then think about those projects from this point early on.
I promise you, next competition we involve you in the beginning, because, you know, even public buildings are being thought about, you know, doing them in timber, you know, even in the middle of town, like huge libraries, whatever. I think that not only you, but also the climate designers of this world are pushing in that direction. I think that's a really good thing. So tell me, Fabian, on a more personal note, and first of all, thank you so much that you were with us today. Are you back in the office yet, overlooking the Zurich Lake yet?
2 or 3 times a week. Actually, not at this moment, because my kids will be turning up every minute. after school. But yeah, I mean, we're still, that's the good thing. We have been digital for the past 15 years. So when this thing hit us, basically everybody just grabbed his notebook and headed to the home office. We have a VPN, we have digital tools. Basically everything has been working remote for the past 11 weeks. I've been just in the office basically to have a bit of a calm space and look after the mail, which is still coming in on paper and not on.
See, that's one thing I wasn't looking for.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Fabian. And please, you know, we talked about some projects we're going to share with the crowd, and thank you so much for that. And we either see each other in a Munich beer garden, or I come and see you in Zurich with the next competition. Hopefully, one way or the other, we're going to hug each other soon. So thank you very much. Stay with us, and we exchange your work. Big kiss. Ciao, ciao. Ciao, ciao. Good morning, Karl, one of my esteemed colleagues at the University of Applied Sciences in Munich. Welcome very much to the Rolling Bar. Thanks for participating.
So I'm glad to come. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
So Karl, you are teaching architectural theory at our school, amongst many other things. I think we're all being used in all our facets. One of the most amazing things that I just read is this book, and we're gonna show it a bit bigger. You and some colleagues wrote a book called RAUMKLEIDER. What made you and your partners come up with this topic in relationship to architecture? Tell us something about the idea behind the book in general.
Well, there's a little story behind this. So it's most about coffee and meeting friends in a cafeteria at the Höngerberg in Zurich. And it was one of these mornings. We had a guest lecture from Anna Minter from Bern. She's now teaching in Linz. And then there was also Ita Heinze Greenberg and Niklas Nerwig. And talked about our interest in research. And then we suddenly discovered that we all have a kind of interest in fashion history related to architecture. And it was a very strange discovery indeed, that there is no book about people dressed within an architectural space. It's astonishing, but I think you can explain why. For architects, if they publish their projects, they want to show the space, their architecture, without being distracted by humans sitting around and making things untidy. And the same with fashion designers. If they present their clothes, they want to focus on the shoes, on the clothes, and not distract the audience by an interesting space. So, but of course, there are many relations between space and architectural space and clothing. And I think the most obvious is climate. So we dress because we want protection from the environment, heat or coldness. And it's an old story. But then, of course, fashion and dress has many other functions. And it is indeed interesting that there's a kind of history about this. And there are a number of interesting architects who have thought of clothes and architectural space as a kind of system, a climate system or a system of meaning, a system of making things interesting. So this morning I staged a little experiment. So you have a black and white painting behind me.
It's making me dizzy already. I love it.
And I'm dressed in a color, so in a blue shirt. So it is a phenomenon that things look more three-dimensional if you have a color in front of black and white. So
I had no idea. Wow.
So it's very easy. You can take it the other way around. You have a colorful background and someone dressed in white or in black. This is something which happens sometimes in Islamic culture when you have a mullah in front of an Islamic mosaic. And mullah is often dressed in black, so he looks very present. So and systems and things like that, these were our interest. And then it is great in the scientific system of Switzerland. You can comparably easy get money for a conference. If you are a teacher at an architectural school, so we wrote an application and we got the project, not a huge amount of money, but we had a very funny, sympathetic conference, and then we made the book out of this. So this is the story, and it all starts with drinking coffee in the morning.
And that's so great, because I think this is how the rolling bar started as well. Many good things start with coffee or tea.
Yeah, meeting people.
And the people. When I picked up your book by accident, really, I was completely fascinated, because I studied at Columbia University with Beatrice Colomina and with Mary McLeod, and I did, because I've always been very interested in fashion. I even wanted to study fashion design at one point, but my parents considered it as a HOCHSCHULE job. Like they were worried I couldn't survive, and who knows. And I did a seminar with them about the dress reform, and they made me read the dress reform that was started at the Mathildenhöhe in Darmstadt with the wives of some artists who got rid of the corset. And so, I've always been following concepts about fashion. And your article that I found, Hausanzug in Raumkapsel, let's just call it onesie and space capsule, deals with utopian space concept in the 70s, around the 70s. I was shocked how weirdly all of the stuff that you're talking about is so relevant right now. I mean, it's almost insane. Like, bubbles, capsules, onesies, the idea of having safe spaces and clean spaces. I mean, clearly you did not know what was coming, because nobody knew. But don't you, when you read your own article, aren't you shocked about how the time relevance is? Tell us something about that.
Yes, so I would even say that the notion of fashion is a kind of misleading in this system, because the concept of clothing is much more universal. It's not that you just play with fashionable designs, but you think of men dressed in architecture as a kind of technological system. So you stay at home to protect you from the virus, and if you go out, you have some kind of protection around your mouth. It's a mask. And then, of course, immediately, the society plays with these kinds of references. So we all had the experiences when the masks started in Germany, and I would say in the US as well. All had these very medicinic looking masks, which were blue or kind of green. And now it's different. So people have discovered the style of their own. So a number of architects now wear black masks. So other people have masks with patterns, colorful, and it is always like this. You have a kind of situation or a kind of fear, ideas about how reality is going to be. And then the society takes over this topic and negotiates what is possible and what is not possible. Indeed, it is kind of history of medicine in this case, but it is also history of technology. And this is what is interesting about the 1960s and the 1970s. So we have a kind of architecture in these days which takes over ideas from the space race. So 1969, landing on the moon. And this is a very exclusive thing. So there are just very few astronauts that really go up into space. Huge sums invested in these technologies, and the normal people, they don't have anything with it. They do not partake. And now fashion steps in and takes over motifs from these extremes, and then people go around with masks, with helmets in the fashion.
But if I may quickly interrupt you, I mean, this is for me, you talk about, these concepts that you're describing are talking about the Space Odyssey, they're talking, it was Kubrick's series, it talks about the building, the house of the future, and with the house of the future, the clothing changes, and people run around in these bubble helmets and so on. And I think, looking at the photographs in your book and reading the text, it's so unbelievable how it relates to this specific time.
Yes, and if you look at the fashion designers of these days, which are mainly French, Pierre Cardin or André Courrèges, they are really playing with masks, with huge sunglasses, with sheets of plexiglass in front of the models' faces. So there is one thing which relates to space, but I think there's also a second undertone in these things. So these are the days when you still believe in progress and the progress of technology. And in a way, the environment is something dangerous. You leave your apartment, and then you put something on to protect you. It's a bit like our situation, but for different reasons. No?
Exactly. Why did they come up with these ideas in the 70s? Akikram and all these people, or Bucky Fuller. Why did they, in the 70s, what were they afraid of?
there are fears and ideas which are related. There's a fascination for a fully programmed environment. So people like Archigram or ArchiZoom, SuperStudio, they think of programming architectural space as a climate system, as an entertainment system that you would not ever leave. You want to have a kind of second creation, which is artificial and architectural. Ideas like warehouses, shopping centers without windows to the outside. This is based in this time, and it is a very special. So you keep the environment out, which cannot so easily be controlled, and you have a second world which you can control.
And you're wearing onesies. It's almost like a PJ, like a pyjama. You're wearing onesies. You were talking about the color of white, how white stands for being clean, and you also talk about the color of black. And most architects wear black, and supposed to be you can wear dirty clothes a second day. Not that we're doing this, but I think it's such interesting comparisons. And Mark Wigley wrote a book about white architecture, and you know, clearly talking about the Bauhaus. So you talked about the color of white and white being you know, an image for being clean. Do you think our architecture is gonna become cleaner again, simpler, you know, back to the Bauhaus or forward to the digital Bauhaus? What do you think, being an architectural theorist?
Well, there's a history about architects wearing black clothes. And in basic, it's a tradition of being an academic without being an academic, because in the Middle Ages and the early new times, 16th, 18th century, there is no university education for architects. So architects want to have this renommee, the status of a lawyer or scientist, and they dress like these people do. So it's not like the French court, which wears colorful, expensive clothes. So it's more like being bourgeois and earnest and a scientist, and this is black. So the Protestant priests are wearing black clothes. This is basically the tradition, and then it is transformed in the new time when black suit is an elegant suit, but it is also a mask which is neutral, and you wear this mask to be easy for other things. You do not need to think so much about what you are wearing, but you're always dressed in a good way in every situation.
It's sort of a uniform, basically.
In a way, so it's a uniform, but a uniform that says something. So being sober and neutral. You do not make a show out of the way you dress, especially because architecture is a service for people who want to show something with the architecture, the architect's design. And then in the late 60s, these tradition of architects wearing black or wearing a suit with a bow tie or something like this, like Le Corbusier, it gets a kind of shift. And this is when André Courrèges says, it's stupid to wear black. So we're living in a time of the washing machine. So we can afford to wash our clothes every time. It's easy. So for André Courrèges, the color of progress is white. Yeah, and this shows I am clean. This is the shift that happens in this time.
So it's a shift towards technology. It's a shift. People thinking about a more technological future, a cleaner future, not necessarily a bland future, because they also use a lot of. They do have very clean cuts. You know, like this white onesie that, by the way, people are wearing a lot of, again these days. I almost wanted to wear a onesie for you because I have one too, and my visor. But back to my question: are we going in this time, you know, learning from the concepts of the 70s, and you talk about transmission mechanisms, how fears and you know, the future of consume and technology and so on, you know, how it changes architecture, how the way we pre-think architecture or fashion. Do you think we're going towards the Bauhaus of the future, like, you know, more cleaner lines in fashion and in architecture? Can you make a prediction?
These are many questions in one question. So it's not so easy to answer. I will try. So I think looking back to the past can help us in answering questions for the future. Looking back to the past, we have certain phenomena which have disappeared today. If you look at the 60s and 70s, so it is not uncommon, even on movies, that people enter their flat, enter their house, their apartment, and then they change clothes, slip into a leisure clothes, a leisure suit. And this is something which has almost disappeared today.
You know what Karl Lagerfeld says about it? If you're running around in jogging pants, you lost control of your life.
Yes. And this has a certain subtext. So the idea of wearing different clothes at home, a leisure suit, means that the outside world is stress, and that you hide into in your flat, in your apartment, for an inner world. And this says something about fears about going to the outside, that the environment is something that you want protection from. Now, I think there is a fundamental shift in the 1970s with the debate about resources, environmental protection, that the idea of an industrialized society growing and growing will stop. And then there has been a fundamental shift towards nature. We want to have nature, we open our windows, and then there's something green in the background, and we want to be in the nature, and we want to have materials which are natural, cotton, wool, so not wearing synthetics, which is very common in the 60s and 70s. So now looking in the future, what will be the tendencies? I would suppose that there will be a kind of negotiation about these topics, so that there is a big trend of going back to nature, but you will adapt these natural or self-made things in your personal style. Just the same phenomena as we can observe it at the moment with the masks. So you have a general need, and then you play with it. And what is the result in the end? There's no scientific reason for this. This is something that the society negotiates all the time. So you have a certain event, the master event. So all the architectural students gather and they have a feast together. So what are you wearing? So, and it depends on the personality. So will you wear shorts and a t-shirt, or will you wear an evening dress and a suit? So, what is possible is negotiated all the time. And there's no answer for this, but it is a topic that people play with.
I think that's super interesting. And you know, I also realized in the beginning we had these medicinal looking masks, and all of a sudden you realize, oh man, you have to go outside again and meet some clients, and maybe there are meetings that you cannot negotiate your way around. We just discussed that earlier, that now people insist that you're coming in person again. And then all of a sudden you wear a camouflage thingy, or the Chamber of Architecture sent out white mouth guards. I was quite surprised. You know, I was thinking either we can personalize it, or they would send us a black one. And so yeah, I think out of this crazy time and the mask, we're trying to make something that's more personalized. And I think the trend to more personalized fashion and jewelry and all of that, it has been in the air for quite some years now. Your article basically for me also talks about building skins, about, you know, envelopes, about it doesn't just you know, how fashion develops doesn't just influence fashion, it also influences architecture. And clearly you show you know, interesting space capsule designs and furniture designs. And, you know, the SpaceX just started. So I think we also there, we have a lot of correlations. Talking about building skins, will they become smarter? Will they become, again, I'm asking you about the future. Will they become, will more technology be involved?
So, yes, I think so. So you stressed one word in your question. You said personalize, personalize, personalize. And I think this is a very big tendency in architecture still. And this has a link to technology. So we are able to personalize because we have the equipment to make things different than in the times of mass production. So in the 60s, we still have a society which depends very much of large numbers of production. You have standard...
Sorry, that's me.
Standard elements which you combine in an interesting way. This is still a matter which is important for us, but we are able to make much more of these elements to have tailor-made solutions, tailor-made parts in a much more extent. So we do this with a computer and computer-aided machines which cut or mold things in a personalized way. And so you can use these technologies in a new way. And there's one element where you really can show it. So classical modern architecture has no ornaments, but the ornament is back into architecture via technology. Mm-hmm. So if you have an interesting surface, you can cut it with a machine today, and architects are playing with these possibilities. So for an ornament, but also for interesting construction systems, to do something which is not usual. And of course, a construction or a facade of a building is a kind of dress, and you want to show that you have these technological abilities. So my idea about this is that there is a comeback of personalized solutions, and maybe it is also the same in fashion. So we usually do not wear tailor-made clothes today, which was a common thing in the 19th century. You had your tailor. You went to your tailor and he made the clothes for you. You go to a fashion store and buy a suit or a shirt which has a standard size. So maybe this will change. There will be a comeback for tailor-made clothes, and architecture is a forerunner, because architects are thinking about the possibilities of these new technologies for their designs.
You gave me the perfect next point. We're talking about serial originals and mass customization in architecture through our digital tools and the way we design. And so our students in the rolling bar are at the same time, while we're doing this talk series, building a bar for our beloved university. And it's very mass customized. So we have, many elements, and every single one has a different shape. So it's serial originals. And we will all see it once we start going there in person again. Karl, you support Karlsstrasse 6, our building. You started an organization. Tell us something about that. That brings me back to our building, to our beloved building Skin, and our building that we actually teach in the middle of the city of Munich.
Yes, I think this is really a special place. So if you come to Munich, you are visiting the big museums, which are very close by. And they, of course, have a tradition which is based in the 19th century. And this is all about, well, showing something with a distance of authority. And then you come to our building and you're in a completely different world. So you leave all these 19th century notions of tradition and respect behind, and you enter a piece of Scandinavian democratic architecture of the 1950s, built in the heart of Munich, to show that Germany is a democracy now. And I think this spirit is very much in this building. It is sober on the outside, but it is like a council house with open space and natural materials and light, and very generous spaces in the inside. So if ever you come to Munich, you should visit us. It is really worth seeing it. And I think it is extremely important to have such a place for the education of architects, because architects have many skills. Of course, they have design skills, they have technological skills, they have drawing skills and things like that. But the main issue of an architect is to negotiate. And the building has this spirit. And this is the reason why I think it is terribly important that we should stay there and keep this positive democratic tradition we have with this building.
We will share the webpage with everybody who's watching the rolling bar. Also, when you open the rolling bar, you see an image of our beloved Lichthof, and even just having spaces where you can breathe, and huge spaces and spaces that bring light into the building. I think we are very lucky, and we are all fighting to preserve this and to stay there. Karl, you have so many topics to cover, and I wish we could talk forever. I think we will share some of the beautiful images in your book RAUMKLEIDER. Thank you so much for talking with me and bringing all these relationships out between fashion and architecture, and also the relationship between this time and the 70s. amazing. Thank you so much. And
my pleasure. So thank you very much for your invitation, and I think you're doing a great project with the Volume Bar. It's great.
And we're doing this so that we have something to talk about when we all meet at KARLSTRASSE 6 again. So
Yes.
online, thank you, dear Karl, and we're gonna do a little feedback round now. Bye bye. See you soon in real life. Ciao. Ciao.